The first roller coaster was built in 1885, and since then they've only gotten bigger and better. Whether they take you upside down for a loop-de-loop or even to the top of a skyscraper, there are all sorts of fun rides out there today. Some are terrifyingly creative. So strap in and join us as we take a look at the top 15 most unusual rides and attractions in the world. Number 15. Skyroller. All things considered, we're going to start our list with something relatively mild. The whole idea of roller coasters and rides of that nature, aside from providing people with death-defying drops, is to first get them up into the air. So the German ride manufacturer Kurzlauer was able to come up with a solid example with the Skyroller. Once you strap into the seat designed to look like a World War II fighter, the Skyroller takes you up, up, and away and lets them feel like they're actually flying a fighter plane. It's a swing-type contraction, whirling riders through the air in a circle, but each car allows the rider to control their own experience by manipulating the wings, and if they do it just right, letting them do barrel rolls just like they were the Red Baron himself. The main concern could be subjecting the riders to a high amount of G-forces for prolonged periods of time, but engineers at Kurzlauer thought ahead, limiting what the Skyroller can do. But for a ride that's able to take a pretty basic concept and turn it on its head, it makes for one unusual ride. Number 14. X-Scream. Okay, here we go. Time to get a little extreme with the X-Scream. The X-Scream takes the incredibly basic concept of a children's teeter-totter and turns it up to 11 for the insane adrenaline junkies. This ride exists at the top of the stratosphere in Las Vegas and lets you live life on the edge, literally. Because the X-Scream tilts its riders 27 feet off of the edge of the building and takes you about 866 feet into the air, it's maybe more insane than it is unusual. But maybe it's unusual to take a kid's game and throw it into the sky. But the X-Scream is the third tallest attraction in the world, probably also making it one of the most terrifying. But the ride is able to use a relatively low-tech magnetic braking system at the bottom of the car. The X-Scream rolls forward, comes to a standstill, and then does the same thing but in the opposite direction, taking everyone backwards and screaming high over Sin City. Number 13. Shweeb. Agro Ventures is a New Zealand-based company that's made a pretty penny off of its unique rides and attractions, but there is one ride that stands out from the rest of their arsenal. We're of course talking about the Shweeb. It's a funny-looking yet simple ride that may not deliver the thrills or screams of some other crazy rides, but it's still pretty cool nonetheless. And it's a little more eco-friendly than the rest too. Riders start climbing into a translucent pedal-powered tube hanging from a monorail, and you face off in a head-to-head races against the other, Shweebs. But if you don't have any friends, that's okay, because you can also race against the clock on the Shweeb. And while working out never really sounds all that fun, the Shweeb is made up of a 2,000-foot-long track that weaves in and out of the scenic farmlands of New Zealand. And if you're strong and fast enough, you can easily make it through this funky little course in less than a minute. But why rush through the scenic route? Number 12. The Fireball. Despite its name, there's no actual fire involved, which actually might deter some thrill seekers from this ride. But if you take one look at the Fireball, you just might think again. While the purpose of a roller coaster is to take you on a full track complete with highs and lows, twists and turns, the Fireball dials things down a bit. The concept of this ride goes back to the 1970s, but it's still a timeless ride. Country fairs need to be able to set up and then break down relatively quickly, so a full-length roller coaster isn't going to make the cut. But what if it's just one big loop-de-loop from start to finish? Why not? As long as nausea is your thing. But the biggest Fireball has a 60-foot diameter and is small enough to be hauled around on a trailer from fair to fair. But it's also big enough to scare the pants off most normal people. Number 11. The Sky Cycle. Japan is no stranger to things that Westerners might deem to be, well, strange, so it should make sense that they've cooked up something to earn a spot on our list. In the Washuzan Highland Amusement Park is a little something called the Sky Cycle, and if you can gather from the name, it's not for anyone who has a fear of heights. But instead of serving up a high-flying roller coaster, the Sky Cycle is a makeshift bicycle on a fixed track that towers 590 feet over the city. And the only thing protecting you from a long and nasty fall is a little tiny seatbelt. There aren't even any guardrails on this thing, so be careful. The unconventional attraction overlooks the islands around the Seto Island Sea and gives an amazing 360-degree view of Japanese locales like Okayama and the Great Seto Bridge. So perhaps the views alone are worth the stress of pedaling for your life that high in the sky. But at least each car comes with 2 seats, so you could bring a friend to talk you down while making your ascent. Number 10. Human Trebuchet. Medieval warfare got pretty intense as new technology was being invented to help kingdoms conquer the known world and become empires. One of the most popular siege weapons, probably in all of history, was the trebuchet. This massive siege engine used a counterweight to catapult enormous stones at enemy gates and castle walls, battering them incessantly until the walls were breached. Cut to modern times and you can probably find 1 or 2 of these trebuchets laying around somewhere. But someone working at the Middlemore Water Park in the United Kingdom did just that. But then looked at it and said, "This is cool, but what if we put a person in there?" And so the human trebuchet was born. If you've got a spare $70 in your pocket and a death wish, then this unusual ride, if you can even call it that, is for you. For the human trebuchet, all you have to do is climb into the little apparatus and let gravity and physics do the rest, launching you hundreds of feet into the air at speeds that are probably a little too fast, and then land in the safety netting at the other end of the field. And unfortunately, in 2002, the human trebuchet proved just how dangerous it could be when a rider missed the net and was killed. Lesson learned that perhaps just because something is new and unusual doesn't make it a good idea. Number 9. Devil's Wheel. Beer and rides probably aren't the best combination, but when you're at Oktoberfest in Germany, common sense tends to go out the window after a few rounds. But if you've ever been to the popular celebration, you may be a little familiar with the unusual attraction known simply as the Devil's Wheel. It's an incredibly simple concept. It's a circular spinning platform with multiple people sitting in the middle. Things start slow, but the Devil's Wheel starts to spin faster and faster, eventually jettisoning the revelers out towards the crowd into a dizzy and probably drunken pile of people. Part of this ride's experience is doing this in front of everyone as a commentator narrates the funky experience and typically makes jokes at the rider's expense. It's not the most complex machine we've encountered so far, but sometimes it's the simplest of things that give us the most joy. Number 8. The Shard. The Shard is the tallest building in Western Europe, standing over 1,000 feet tall with 87 stories. But sometimes being the tallest building isn't enough of an attraction, so you've got to up the ante for when people get bored. But this is a list of weird rides, so the Shard has something weird up its sleeve. The Shard offers people a virtual reality ride that gives them a jaw-dropping, death-defying experience, but without the risk of life and limb on something known as the slide. All you have to do is strap yourself into an immobile chair, put on the virtual reality headset, and away you go. You're taken down an imaginary slide that starts at the top of the Shard and heads straight for the ground below, reaching speeds of 100 miles per hour. It is pretty insane and probably a great way to begin to get over your fear of heights. So if you've always wanted to build a slide 87 stories up but couldn't get the proper permits, then perhaps virtual reality is the way to go. It truly is a one-of-a-kind experience, and perhaps the future of rides. Only time will tell. Number 7. The Vanishing roller coaster. The next unusual ride on our list can only be found at the Cosmo World amusement park in Yokohama, Japan. It takes the basic roller coaster concept and ups the ante a little bit and provides a different kind of immersive experience. It's got all of the unusual stylings of your typical roller coaster, but there's one drop in particular that gives this roller coaster its name. Riders will start to notice that they're getting closer and closer to the water below at increasing speeds, and to the viewers on the sideline, it looks like the car has gone straight in. But what's happening is the Vanishing roller coaster enters a tunnel that takes you underwater and even provides a fake little splash upon entry. The entire underwater experience lasts for a full 2 minutes, so if you're claustrophobic, then you may want to steer clear of this wet and wild ride. And even though this roller coaster doesn't take you in the water, it's one ride that'll have you holding your breath the entire time. Number 6. The Derby Racer. If you've ever had dreams and aspirations of racing in the Kentucky Derby, but didn't quite have the money to become an equestrian, then you can thank the folks over at Rye Playland in New York for cooking up the next best thing. Their Derby Racer takes the ideal of a carousel and supercharges it. A typical carousel only goes about 10 miles an hour and stops being exciting after you've turned 7 years old, and you never want to be the kid who gets stuck sitting in the carriage that doesn't move up and down like the rest of the horses. But with the Derby Racer, everyone gets their own horse that moves up and down in a more realistic fashion. Oh yeah, and the ride itself reaches a top speed of 35 miles an hour. That's faster than a car ride in your suburban neighborhood. The machine is made by Pryor and Church, and as of today, there are only 2 in existence. It takes a kiddie ride and manages to repackage it for a more mature rider, all while fulfilling that need for speed. This ride first opened back in 1928 and managed to go even faster before rules and regulations on rides existed. Number 5. Barbara Hrbek's Zucker Bug Carousel. Growing up, we all had that weird kid in class who loved creepy crawlers, and on some unfortunate occasions for the rest of us, would bring in his favorite bugs to school, only for them to leave their grasp and buzz around the room freaking everyone out. But the Bronx Zoo in New York managed to make a ride especially for that kid and show them that they're not alone, and throw a little bit of fun learning into the mix as well. The Barbara Hrbek Bug Carousel is exactly what it sounds like, but instead of horses and ponies taking you in a giant circle, you're riding bugs. And sure, the bugs aren't real, but when they're blown up to life-size proportion, it's hard not to get a little queasy. Kids and parents can pony up on bugs like praying mantis, ladybird beetles, a grasshopper, and no one's favorite, a cicada. But according to the management at the Bronx Zoo, the uglier bugs tend to be the biggest hit with the little ones. Perhaps it's because so many young kids are fearless, but any sane person seeing an insect that big ought to be smart enough to head for the hills, as long as they're not ant hills. Number 4. Kingda Ka. Six Flags Great Adventure in New Jersey has been a popular site for the adventurous for what seems like forever, and the place is so big that it's got a street named after it. They have all sorts of unusual rides with even wackier names, but there's one that takes the cake, Kingda Ka. Kingda Ka holds the titles of the tallest roller coaster in the world and the fastest in North America, so when you strap on in, you know you're in for one insane ride. The roller coaster is 456 feet high and kicks things off with a launch that sends you straight up vertically at 128 miles an hour. But what goes up must come down, and your stomach is going to be in your throat on Kingda Ka because you come back down vertically as well. You're coming straight back down as it looks and feels like the earth is rising towards you in the blink of an eye. Kingda Ka is half the height of the Empire State Building, and why something this tall, this fast, and this heart-pounding exists is anyone's guess. Number 3. The Looper. Since we've entered this stomach-churning and all-around barf-inducing territory, let's move over to Noble's Amusement Resort in Columbia County, Pennsylvania. They're known for their ride simply known as the Looper. It was developed back in 1942 by the Alan Herschel Company, who took the idea of hamster ball and ran with it. Because we can't let hamsters have all the fun. They made steel life-size hamster wheels, slapped some seats and handlebars in there, and let it rip. The Looper takes a few of these human hamster wheels and puts them on a mechanism that takes them in a small circle. But each wheel of steel is going to be turning the entire time, taking the riders upside down the entire way. It's really just a simple design, but sometimes those can be the best and the most unusual. Just make sure you don't fill up on funnel cake and cotton candy before you strap into this thing. Otherwise, it's going to throw your stomach for a real loop too. Number 2. Ye Olde Mill. The Tunnel of Love is an amusement park classic, no matter how cheesy it may be. Today, though, they're pretty few and far between. They're big, which means they're expensive to maintain, and people have just lost interest now that we can go 150 miles an hour on a roller coaster. But Rye Playland has no shortage of funky and unusual rides, and they've got one more up their sleeve that deserves our time. Their Ye Olde Mill takes the Tunnel of Love and flips it on its head, taking riders back in time to the Gold Rush era, complete with giant creepy mannequins filling you in on what life was like back then and stopping their mining to wave hello. The concept isn't too outlandish, but somehow manages to give everyone the heebie-jeebies. Plus, the theme doesn't scream amusement park ride either. And when there aren't any animatronic prospectors in the scene, the ride is just a dimly lit tunnel. It's weird, unusual. It's Ye Olde Mill. Number 1. Death Simulator. The final entry on our list isn't for the faint of heart, but if you've ever been dying to know what it was like to leave this realm of existence, then the Window of the World theme park in Shenzhen, China is one step ahead of you. Their biggest and strangest attraction, a death simulator, is exactly what it sounds like. It's touted as a 4D experience where you're put in a coffin and then pushed into a fake furnace by an attendant. So you get to overcome your fear of dying and of claustrophobia in one fell swoop. As the ride slowly moves along, things get hot as the temperature is turned up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The The ride is completely safe, without any spins or taking you upside down, but it's guaranteed to not only freak you out, but give you one unusual experience. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.